Celeste. Sorry. So just allow me to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about the journey that we had with my daughter Celeste when she was diagnosed. And so Celeste, this was back in 2011. My daughter Celeste was 12 years old when she was diagnosed with pineoblastoma, which is an extremely rare brain tumor. The chances of getting pineoblastoma is 1 in 7 million. So there's only ever a handful of children who are diagnosed with that at any given time. And I think what I'd like to preface, what I'll be sharing with you today, is that I will be teaching about the 7 pillars to living with grace and ease. We discovered in our journey of the whole cancer journey with my daughter Celeste, it was definitely the hardest thing we've ever done. But we found a way to get through it without as much struggle. Or there were certain lessons that I learned along the way that helped to make it easier. And now, of course, this is me looking back in retrospect, because we're going back almost 10 years now since our journey began. And so it's easy in retrospect to be able to say, oh, I did this and this and this. But I'd like to share with you some of the things that we did along the way that now I'm able to put together and say, these 7 pillars are what helped made it easier. And I know today, in today's world with COVID, coping with all the stresses that you have as a cancer mom, as a cancer parent, having to deal with that, and then having COVID on top, and the job insecurities that happen, and the financial, and the relationship problems, the losses, all of those things compounded together make life very difficult. And so I'm hoping that some of these things that I'm going to be sharing today, we're going to make things just a little bit easier for you. And these are all, I call them spiritual pillars, but really they're concepts that are taught all over the place. And whether you call them spiritual or you don't call them spiritual, they're general ideas that you can do to alleviate the stress in your life, to turn it down, to take that knob and just make it a little bit easier so you can get through each day with grace and ease. I discovered that Ernest Hemingway said that courage is grace under pressure. And I've just learned to embrace that you are the most courageous moms on the planet. And that comes from taking everything that life is throwing at you right now with grace, with ease. So I'm going to start off by listing those 7 pillars. I'm going to invite you to do a number of things along the way. I'm just not going to speak at you the whole time. I'm going to invite you to participate off screen, and we'll have some question and answers at the end. So if you can get a pen and a piece of paper out, or pull out your phone, pull up a note so you can make some notes along the way. So the 7 pillars are: be bold, expand your vision, grow your gratitude, connect to spirit, love unconditionally, give generously, and build faith. And I'd like you to look at these from wherever you are at. So what does spirit mean to you? Spirit might be the universe, might be meaning peace. It might mean might have a religious context for you. So it's all up to you and how you want to interpret these. And I believe that these actions are what true strength is about. true emotional, spiritual strength is all about. It moves us from theory to practice, and it helps us to get back to a place of joy and peace in our life. So in the time that we have together this evening, I'd like to share a few examples of the 7 pillars and how they help me to feel stronger, how it helped me to bounce back quicker, and how I developed a sense of belonging and connection. And it helped me to feel more loving and peaceful. Now, I want to be completely transparent with you. In my particular case, with my daughter Celeste, it was almost a decade ago when we went through this process. And with pineoblastoma, the diagnosis with pineoblastoma, the outcome isn't very good. And unfortunately, with the treatment my daughter had, none of the children survived. And that's different today. It was 10 years ago. And the St. Jude's protocols have become much better. And the children are doing much better. But my child did pass away. And I am going to be sharing that story. But I'd like you to know that that's not the same for everyone, that there are treatments out there that are so amazing, and not everyone's outcome is going to be the same as our outcome with Celeste. But there were some really deep lessons that I needed to learn along the way. So Celeste had done, her treatment plan was 30 rounds of radiation, followed by 3 to 6 months of high-dose chemotherapy and stem cell rescue. And she had gone through that. She had been absolutely amazing. And she had gone back to school. We had done her MRIs, and her tumor had shrunk 98.5%. And I was at that point where, okay, this next MRI means everything's going to be in the clear. And when the doctor came back and said, I'm sorry, there's more tumors growing, I was devastated. And I became frantic, and I just said, we will do more. We'll just have to go to Mexico. We'll go to Europe. We'll just go somewhere else and find an answer. And as I was in this desperate, frantic emotion, all of a sudden, I had this realization that as much as I was willing to do anything in the whole world for my little girl, it wasn't actually my fight. That this was up to Celeste. And if she wanted to fight this, we would fight it. But if she felt like she couldn't do it anymore, then that was okay too. And I realized that in the end, what I wanted was for my daughter, I wanted the best for my daughter. And in that surrendering and realizing that no matter the outcome, we could handle this. And when I let go of my expectations if it had to go a certain way, there came to be so much peace. And so I'd like you to think about in your own lives that surrendering. And what do you need to realize that you can handle it no matter what happens? So I'd like you to look at these pillars from that perspective of there's a bigger perspective out there. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But when my daughter was first diagnosed, the first thing that I had to do was sort of survey all of our resources and realize the first thing I realized was I couldn't do this alone. And I needed to be bold. And I was going to have to ask for help. And I've always been quite an independent person. But the first thing I realized was this was one thing that was beyond me, that I now needed to become the best mommy I could be. If I wanted to be able to do this for Celeste, be there for her for all of this, I was going to need an army. I was going to need a team behind me. And I know each one of you have got your social worker and your doctor and your nurses, and you have that team. But you also have a greater team. You've got your family. You've got friends. And I want you to realize that they're there for you more than you think. Some of you may have acknowledged, yes, I've got friends and they're helping me out. And there are some people who are letting you down. And there are people who have walked away. But there are people out there that you won't realize right now who will help in a way that you never expected. The generosity that you will see will be amazing. When we first went to the hospital, I got the call to say my daughter was already in the hospital, they already knew there was something wrong, that she had a brain tumor, and I was simply being called to race there and told Celeste has a tumor. And on my way there, I was actually a couple hours away. On my way there, I started to make a list of all the people I could call. We needed to find somewhere for me to stay, somewhere for my husband and my son to stay, somewhere people, like I was going to need food, just all of these things. And then there was the transfer to Sick Kids from London. And then it was, okay, well, I'm going to need a place to stay when I get there. And it was just one thing after another. And I created a dream list of who I was going to need help from. And not everyone said yes, but I was surprised by how many who did. So I'd like you to think about in your own life right now, something that you're struggling with at this particular point in time, for now in May 2021. What do you need help with? And who can you ask for support? Who haven't you thought of before? So this is where I'd like you to grab a piece of paper and write it down. And I'll give you a moment to do that. And now I want you to write down when you commit to actually doing that. When will you make that call or have that conversation? Who could you use that help from? So that's the first pillar, being bold. That is part of that second pillar that I mentioned, expand your vision. It ties into it. Expand your vision beyond who you thought maybe would help you. Who else could you call? Just widen that view just a little more, because you'll be amazed at how people on that periphery actually will jump in to help. So going back to that story that I shared about Celeste and her MRI, and realizing that there were more spots, and that franticness that I had, that was in that moment of surrendering. That was me again, expanding my vision and realizing that no matter the situation, it was still going to be okay. No matter what happened, if I faced the worst and realized, you know what, I can still make it through this, then it meant that I can do anything. So I'd like you to think about a situation in your own life that you could benefit from a bigger perspective. One that might feel hopeless. What could you do to surrender and see it from a bigger perspective? Can you envision the situation from a different point of view? And what peace will you gain from this new perspective? And what strength will it give you to do that? Because that was one of the blessings for me of recognizing that no matter what happened, I wanted what was best for my daughter. There was a sense of peace that came. And then once I began to feel that peace, I had an overwhelming sense of gratitude. And that's the third pillar. One of the things that I learned to be grateful for was how amazing others were in supporting our family, and especially my daughter when we needed it. So a few months, 5 months after we had that conversation with Dr. Carney, Celeste wasn't doing well and she had headaches, and they told her she was going to need another MRI. And we went in for the MRI, and afterwards, her stepmom, Michelle, stayed with the technician, and I took Celeste up for a bone scan. And we were sitting there waiting, and of course, all you ever do in the hospital is wait. So we're sitting in this little room, and it's freezing, absolutely freezing. And I've got Celeste is laying on the table for the scan. She's wrapped in a warm blanket. They've brought me a warm blanket. It's so cold in this room. So we're sitting there just freezing and waiting. And Michelle sends me a text, and she says it doesn't look good. But I don't know what it doesn't look good means. And so I turned to Celeste and I said, hey, sweetie, if you could do anything in the whole world, what would you want to do? If you could go anywhere, if you could meet anyone, if you could try anything new, what would you like to do? And she's like, oh, Mommy, I want to go to Europe. She said, I want to go to Paris and see the Eiffel Tower. And I want to go to London, England and see Big Ben. And I want to go to Italy and see the Leaning Tower of Pisa. She says, I want to have pain au chocolat in France. And she wants to, I want to have Swiss chocolate in Switzerland. And she had this whole trip all planned out. And I said, hey, sweetie. Oh, and she said, you know what? I want Haley to come with us. And I'll tell you about Haley in a moment. I said, if you could meet anyone, sweetie, who would you want to meet? She goes, oh, Robin Williams. So I wrote it down. I'm like, anyone else? She said, Celine Dion. So I wrote it down. I said, anyone else? She's like, oh, Anne Hathaway. We had just seen Les Mis. And she, of course, had seen Annie and Princess Diaries and Ella Enchanted and a few other movies. So I wrote that down and I said, anyone else? Well, we're huge Doctor Who fans. And so she'd always wanted to meet the cast of the Doctor Who TV show. She wanted to just meet the whole cast. So I wrote all of these things and I'm like, is there anything else you'd like to do? And she said she wanted to try new foods. She wanted to go rock climbing. She wanted to learn how to make Nanaimo bars. So I wrote all of these things down. And then we went back downstairs. After the bone scan was done, we went back downstairs. And that's when Dr. Carney talked to us and said that things didn't look good, that she had tumors all over her little brain. And at that moment, when they told us that news, I had already made a plan that it didn't matter how much time we had with my daughter, we were going to make every day with her wonderful. And so we took this list, this bucket list. The doctor said she couldn't fly because she had brain tumors and the pressure in the airplane. And yeah, that just wasn't going to happen. So flying was out of the question, no Europe. So we sent a message out to everyone we knew and said, hey, if you know anyone who knows anyone, this is what Celeste wants. And that was on a Friday. And the following Wednesday, we're sitting at her dad's house, and her stepmom answers the phone, and some man calls asking for Celeste. And she's like, well, can I ask who's calling? And he says, David Tennant, who is the doctor in the Doctor Who TV show. And he was our favorite doctor. And so he's calling Celeste, and she's talking to him in the living room. She's talking to him on the phone like she does this every day of her life. She's talking about spaghetti bolognese and her favorite episodes and just all of these awesome things. And the rest of us are on the extension in the hallway going, oh my goodness, we were just freaking out on the extension listening to them talk. Well, that was Wednesday. The very next day, someone went out of their way and made incredible connections, and I'm not exactly sure who did it. Well, Celeste got a Skype call from Robin Williams. He was on tour in Salt Lake City, and he called her the night after his show. And they both laying down because he was tired from his late show, and she's laying down because she's tired, and they're talking on Skype. And he's barking like a seal and telling her all about his place in San Francisco and his dog named Oscar and his cat, and I've forgotten her name, and the view that he has of the bay and how the seals go by, and he starts barking like a seal. It's just like real Robin Williams. It was absolutely amazing. And then the next day, somebody went banging on doors in Vegas, and Celine Dion called Celeste to tell her to tell her that she loved her and that she was amazing. And she dedicated that evening's performance to Celeste. And then the very next day, people, when you tell a whole bunch of teenagers that you want to do something incredible, I think they bombarded Hollywood with phone calls, with emails, with tweets, with any way that they could electronically. And someone got hold of Anne Hathaway, and she Skyped with Celeste for 45 minutes. She called Celeste her new best friend, and they talked about all these things that they had in common. It was absolutely amazing. But what was most amazing was how people went out of their way to do this for my little girl. The amount of effort it took for them to pull off all of those miracles, that if just one of them had happened, that would have been incredible. To have 4 days in a row of miracles was amazing. And then it didn't stop. Someone got hold of Karen Gillan in Scotland. She played in Doctor Who, but she was also in the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And she sent a video message to Celeste. Matt Smith, who was the doctor in the Doctor Who show at the time, he called from London, England. Jim Carrey sent a box set of DVDs. It was just amazing what people did for my little girl. And the amount of gratitude that I had for them and what they did for us, just because we asked. We were bold enough to say, hey, we have this dream. We want to make it happen. And people were so amazing. So I'd like you to think about in your life the people who have done amazing things. And the gratitude that you have for them. And it could be little things. I had friends who I would call them up. I had one friend, I was at the hospital. I couldn't stay at Ronald McDonald's house yet. And I had laundry that needed to be done. And I called up my friend. She drove to the hospital, picked up my laundry, took it home, washed it, and brought it back. I had another friend when Celeste was having a day where she was so sick. It was just one of those days, and she needed me by her like every moment. And I hadn't eaten in hours and hours all day, and I was starving. And so all I had the energy to do was send a message to a friend to say, help, can someone please send me food? And they drove all the way to the hospital just to bring food for me. There are and I'm sure you have so many examples in your own life, but I'd like you to take a moment to think about the gratitude that you have for the people who are doing amazing things, whether they're big things or little tiny things that just mean so much. So I'd like you to think of 3 amazing individuals in your life right now who have stepped up to the challenge of supporting you in the last year. And I'm going to give you a minute to pull out your phones and send one of them a text right now to thank them for being there for you. Okay? So we got 60 seconds. On your mark, get set, go. Pull out those phones. And then as soon as you're done in the chat, please send me a note that says done. And sorry, I'm assuming that people can write in the chat. Okay, I got one done in. Got another done. Another. 4. 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going until we have 10. 9. Just need one more. 10. Awesome. So the 4th pillar is connect to spirit. Now I want you to take that in whatever way that means to you. If that means in a religious sense, then that's great. If that means that it's in a general sense of peace and love and gratitude, connecting to those positive emotions in your life. When we're going through such difficult changes, being centered, present, and connected back to spirit can be so important. And I found it was so important to me, but I also found it difficult. I had a lot of heavy emotions that kept coming up. And when Celeste was in the middle of treatment, A friend of mine felt really impressed to send me a book. She sent me a book called Zero Limits by Joe Vitale. And he had written it with Dr. Hyun Moo. And it's all about a process called Ho'oponopono. That's Ho'oponopono. Ho'oponopono. And I don't expect you to get it right in the first try. But I'll help you with it as we go along. So Ho'oponopono is this long word that means 4 simple things. It means, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, I love you. And what I discovered was, as I was learning about this process, in our lives, we have a choice in every moment. When we are present in the current moment, there is peace. This moment right here, right now, is peace. But what happens is we get caught, rather than being in the present moment, we get caught looking in the rearview mirror at something that happened a minute ago, 5 minutes ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, a lifetime ago. We get stuck replaying that movie of what happened before. And that's when we get caught up in the negative emotions of anger, frustration, hurt, resentment, jealousy, all of the negative emotions. But the problem when we get caught in those negative emotions is I can't just say to you, stop being angry or stop being resentful. It doesn't work that way. We can't just say, stop it. We need a process to bring us out of that negative emotion and back into the present moment. And so Ho'oponopono is a beautiful process that does that. So when I get caught in a negative emotion, when I'm feeling anger or resentment is my negative emotion of choice, that's where I get stuck in resentment. And we all have our preferences, whether it's anger or jealousy or bitterness or judgment. We all have, we can of course feel them all, but some like myself, I get stuck in resentment. And so the only person it's hurting when I get stuck in resentment is me. And I can't connect to the divine for myself. I can't connect and be centered into now if I'm stuck in that negative emotion of resentment. But what I can do is I can have a conversation with myself or the divine, whichever is more comfortable. And I can say, I'm sorry. I'm stuck in, and I just acknowledge where I'm at. I'm sorry I'm stuck in resentment right now. I'm sorry that I'm angry. I'm sorry that and have that conversation with your higher self or with the divine and say, I'm sorry. And acknowledge that your higher self or the divine will always forgive you. And so the second step is to say, please forgive me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. And because the divine loves you, your higher self loves you, they will always say yes. And then you can thank them. You can thank the divine. You can thank your higher self. Say, I thank you, and then I love you. So we can go from that negative, horrible feeling inside to having that release and the gratitude and then the love. So it's, please forgive me. Thank you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And then I'm back in that space right now. So I discovered this when I was sitting in the hospital with my daughter, Celeste. And There would be days when my ex-husband or his wife would be sitting across the room from me, and the whole time that they're there, I'm just stewing, absolutely stewing, and thinking about all the nasty things that my ex did to me, just all the horribleness that I had to deal with them. And he's sitting across the room from me, and he couldn't care less. I'm the one who's stewing inside. He's not actually doing anything to me in that moment, but I'm the one who is stewing and feeling horrible and in that resentment. And so I would look at him, all of these emotions would come up, and then I would turn and look upwards, of course, just in my mind, and say, I'm sorry, I'm feeling resentment. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And then I would feel at peace again. Now, inevitably, in this particular situation, I would look back over at my ex, and then it would come back to me again. But I would just keep doing the process over and over and over again until I could finally look at him and those thoughts wouldn't come back. Or I could just let it go and go, no, I'm going to stay in this peace. I don't have to look at him. I don't have to go back into the rearview mirror and think about what happened 10 years ago. I can now just stay in that peace and that feeling of love and gratitude. And that then, so I like it if you can write down on a piece of paper, Ho'oponopono. And what I'll do is I'll type it into the chat so you know how to spell it. H-O'-Oponopono. Okay, so that's how you spell it. Pronounce it Ho'oponopono. And then if you can write down the 4 steps. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you. And you can use them anywhere at any time, no matter what situation comes up. Even if the situation happened just a minute ago, it still works. And even if the situation happened 10 years ago, it still works. The key is to get back into that space where you are centered and feeling at peace. And what I love about it is the last part is the feeling of love. And so that is the 6th pillar, love unconditionally. So when my daughter Celeste was diagnosed with pineoblastoma, when she was first diagnosed, I did not want to go online and be totally scared by her diagnosis. And so I just didn't. I'm like, no, I'm just going to focus on what the doctors have told me, and we're just going to just do what we're doing. And I just felt like it was better for my own mental health not to go searching it out. But a couple of months later, I started getting this nagging feeling. Laura, go and look online. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I am not going to do that to my mental health. I'm not going to do that. But this thought just kept coming back and coming back and coming back. So I finally gave in, and I looked up pineoblastoma, and I found that there was this one website that another mom had put together called Pineo Kids, where she described this particular tumor because there's so few kids who have it. But then she went the extra mile, and she tried to document all the kids that she could find because there are just so few of them, and how old they were when they were diagnosed, and how long ago it was. And so I'm reading through this list. I've now been sucked in, and I'm reading through this list, and there's a 16-year-old boy, and he was diagnosed in 1986, and there's a 2-year-old little girl, and and I'm just going through this list, and then all of a sudden there's a 12-year-old girl, and she was diagnosed in February 2011. Well, my daughter Celeste was diagnosed in February 2011, and she was 12 years old at the time. And I'm like, oh my goodness, there's another 12-year-old girl out there with the exact same diagnosis at the exact same time. I later went on to do the calculation, the statistics on that. The odds of that happening was 23.5 billion to 1. And then the other miraculous part was this woman who put this little girl on the website. Her mom didn't even know that she had done that Haley was listed on there, but she had the contact page for her care pages on there. So I reached out to this family and said, hey, my daughter has the exact same tumor as yours and was just diagnosed too. And Haley's mom, Haley's mom is Lori. So I'm Laura and Haley's mom is Lori. And it was just like, how many more similarities could there be? And I was just blown away that we found this other family because they were down in New Jersey and doing their treatments at CHOP in Philadelphia. So we find this family, and I'm just so impressed by everything that brought the two of us together that I felt strongly that I needed to write a book about these two little girls. So that's exactly what I did. I felt really strongly that like I've got to write about these two amazing little girls and how well they were doing. And it came out in 2005, and it's called Two Mothers, One Prayer, Facing Your Child's Cancer with Hope, Strength, and Courage. So this is Haley and this is Celeste. And they were able to meet in Toronto in 2012. And that picture was taken at the CN Tower. So when I was writing the book, I told the story of Celeste and Haley and their diagnosis, and then I shared all the emails that went back and forth between Lori and I as our girls were going through their treatments, because they were both on the St. Jude's protocol, and I just shared all of that. And then the last part of the book was all the lessons that we learned along the way. And one of those chapters is simply about love. And so I found a quote by a French philosopher named Jan del Aglio, and he had a definition of love that I just think is amazing. And I'm going to read it to you right from the book. So French philosopher Jan del Aglio's definition, I'm going to need a drink. Jan del Aglio's definition of love speaks to me. Love is an expression of tenderness. To me, tenderness is about recognizing that something or someone is fragile. It is about being able to hold or embrace them in a manner that understands and accepts that if you treat them too roughly, they could break, physically or emotionally. And in recognizing that fragility, it was very easy for me to recognize and see that in my daughter, how fragile she was. But it's something that we can also apply to ourselves. Recognizing our own fragility and treating ourselves tenderly. And I'm not going to treat the cat tenderly when I chase her off of scratching my couch. Sorry, she wasn't supposed to get in here. So can we treat ourselves with that same tenderness and fragility as we do our children that we love dearly? Can we treat ourselves with that same love? And one of the other quotes that I found, ones that I just love, there's a man named Dave Blanchard, and he wrote a book because he worked with Og Mandino. And so Dave Blanchard's book is called Today I Begin a New Life. And he talks about Og Mandino and his 10 scrolls. And And the second scroll is all about love. And so as Dave did research into understanding more about love, he explained about the word charity. And one of the things that we don't, a lot of times when we're looking at the word charity, we think of, oh, just give money. Oh, that's about like just supporting somebody financially to do some big project. But charity actually comes from the Greek word agape, and it means to see someone as God sees them, to see them from that bigger perspective. And it's all about that, that if you can see someone as the divine sees them and treat them in the way that the divine would treat them, how much better would you treat them? But that also applies to yourself. If you can see how the universe sees you and adores you, and allow that to be rooted in you, the same way that we talked about with Ho'oponopono, that the final step to that is saying, I love you. The universe is saying that back to you. The universe loves you. And when you can embrace that love and then share that love with others and love unconditionally, then that brings so much more peace as well. And as I was saying about that definition of agape and charity, brings us to when we can love someone unconditionally, then we become more generous. And so that's the next pillar, is to give generously. But there's a catch. And this is I learned from Brene Brown. She was talking on Oprah's life class, and I literally wrote it down word for word because I was so impressed. And she says, and I'll just read this to you, when you cannot accept and ask for help without self-judgment, then when you offer other people help, you are always doing so with judgment, because you have attached judgment for asking for help. When you extract worthiness for helping people, that's judgment. When you don't extract worthiness and you think, I'm just helping you because one day I'm going to need help, that's connection and vulnerability. So in our generosity, we not only can be generous with others, but we need to allow to reciprocate and allow others to be generous with us. It has to flow both ways. And then I could obviously speak about this for hours. I want to quickly get on to the seventh pillar tonight, which is build faith, which I could literally speak about for an hour just on that one pillar. But I want to talk about a little, just for 2 minutes, I'm going to talk about faith before we open it up for questions. So I'd like you to think about faith in a new way. One of the things that I struggled with when Celeste was first diagnosed was I said, we need a miracle. And everything that I read said that miracles come from faith. And I'm like, but how does that work? I don't get it. I just couldn't understand how that worked. And then I discovered that we don't always understand the word faith. We throw the words hope, belief, and faith around like interchangeably, like they're all the same thing. And so I want to just do a quick clarification. Hope is when we have a beautiful vision of something and a positive emotion to go along with it. We can picture so clearly something we want in our life and that we have a hope. But hope doesn't move us into action. Hope just sits there off in the distance. And the difference between hope and belief is when we begin to fall in love with that vision. When you look at the etymology of the word belief, it comes from the word be as in being, and leaf is an Indo-European word that means love. It literally means to fall in love with something when you believe it. We can believe in a person, or we can believe in a thing, we can believe in a concept, we can believe in God. All of those things, it means we've fallen in love with this vision that we've seen. But that still doesn't move us to action. I can put an acorn in my hand and imagine that acorn as a beautiful oak tree in my yard, creating shade for me to lie under in the summertime. And I can put a tire swing in it for my grandkids to swing on. I can imagine this gorgeous tree. But while that acorn sits in my hand, it will never become an oak tree. What then moves it, and this is what faith actually means, is I look at that acorn and then I turn to someone who has a higher knowledge than me, in this case, an arborist. And the arborist would say, so this is inspired wisdom, who would then tell me, you need to plant that acorn so many inches below the surface of the soil. You're going to make sure that it has this much water. You make sure that it has sunshine. You're going to keep the squirrels off of it from digging them up. You're going to nurture it as it grows. And he's going to give me all of this advice. But then I have to trust that advice enough to act on it. And so the way that I remember what faith really is, it's believe, listen, act, serve, and trust. And you can write that down as BLAST. Believe, listen, act, serve, and trust. So the next part, the last pillar, is about building that faith. Build yourself so that you can learn how to turn to inspired wisdom, begin to trust it, listen to it, act on it, believe it, fall in love with it. And all of that together is building your faith. So you'll know what you need to do in the situations. You'll act on it, you'll do it. And that's when miracles happen. And it's not this complicated thing. So if you think about in your own life, where do you need more faith and action? Where do you need to listen more? Where do you need to trust more? What do you need to believe? So thank you so much for your time this evening. Now I'll turn this back over to Shreya.
Thank you so much, Laura, for sharing all this raw, powerful story of your life and Celeste's life, and interweaving it amongst the 7 pillars and having that personal connection. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I wanted to open up the floor. If anybody has any questions for Laura, you could just turn on your camera and ask, or type it in the chat. Susan says, thank you so much, Laura. You've been so open about your experience. And I do have a question that a parent submitted in advance. And she asked, maintenance is starting in a couple of months at the same time that her 6-year-old is going back to school. Her 4-year-old is starting school and she's going back to work. She doesn't want to rob the summer of joy, but knowing there are a lot of changes ahead, she wanted your advice on how does she prepare herself and her kids for change without overwhelming or scaring them.
Okay. So the thoughts that I had on that came back to a little bit of surrendering. The first thing is to be okay with the fact that it might be hard in September. And that's okay. And to begin putting things in place in the meantime of who can I ask to help me through this, to recognize the difficulty that's coming up. Who can I put that in? Who can I enlist to help you? Who can I enlist to help myself in that situation? And a lot of love for your kids. And just say, and let them know, you know what, this might be a little bit hard. You don't have to go into a lot of detail, but you can just say, you know what, and all of our kids, no matter what they're going through, they need to learn. There's going to be times in life where it's just going to suck a little bit. It's going to be hard, but that's okay. That they are strong, they are amazing, and they'll be able to do it. And you do it together, and you don't ever do it alone. And just let them know, you know what? We're going to be doing this, and it's going to be, we might have frustrating days, but if we all pull in together and we ask other people for help, what do we need? And ask them. They're smart, they're capable, they're amazing. If you tap into that energy with them of letting them know how amazing that they are and say, hey, I know you can do this. We're going to be able to do this. It might be a little bit hard and we're not going to do it perfectly, but we're going to try and let them step up to the challenge that rather than this is going to be hard and we can't do it and the chaos, go into it as the challenge and embrace that and embrace all of your strengths and let them say what they think. Help them envision a positive, a hopeful way of answering, of doing this. So I hope that helped a little bit.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Laura? Feel free to ask now on camera or in the chat. In the meantime, Laura's website is lauralane.ca, and she has copies of your book there and other resources on your website.
Yep. We have so I asked a whole bunch of cancer moms, what's the one thing you wish you knew when your child was first diagnosed? What do you know now that you wish you had known when your child was first diagnosed? And they came back with incredible amount of answers. We pared it down to 101. And so that's a free little booklet that you can get right on my website. And all kinds of just little tricks and just the importance of asking for help and different things that you can do, ask for resources that were out there. It was just a great resource for them. And then we've also have a blog, which is tied to my podcast. So the first 6 episodes went up right before COVID hit, but we're getting back to it again later this summer. I'm hoping in time for September, we'll have the new podcast episodes up. And that was me interviewing a whole bunch of experts on their best advice. So everyone from Dr. Bernie Siegel, who is a world-renowned pediatric surgeon, and his advice and his wonderful stories. Marcy Shimoff, who is an international bestseller. I've got physicians and naturopaths and chaplains and just a whole variety of people that I interviewed. And so we'll be sharing those on the blog and the podcast.
That sounds great. So make sure you check out lauralane.ca. And Laura also hosts free virtual Qigong classes Wednesdays at 11. Free for our families to attend. You can just email us at info@opac.org to get the link. And Laura, can you just briefly explain what Qigong is and how it can help our parents?
So Qigong is something that I learned. I wish I had known it when Celeste was in the hospital, but I learned it afterwards. It's something that I find it's a moving meditation. So I had been wanting to learn how to meditate daily forever, and it never happened until I learned Qigong, which is a series. I learned a 24 posture Qigong, a series of movements that help me to be centered and calm and relaxed. It can be done from a sitting position. It can be done, and we also do it from standing. I do mostly standing, but it can also be done from sitting. And it's everything that just gentle flowing movements. And there's a whole variety of them. This is just one of them. You can see a little bit on camera. So I do all 24 postures. We take 45 minutes to an hour. And like I said, it's a moving meditation and it's a resource that you can learn. Once you learn it, you can do it anywhere. And you can share it with your child as well for those times when you just need to calm down and get centered again. And it's a great resource to connecting to spirit, to your higher self, to the universe, to God. I find it just fills my soul to be able to do it, and understanding that women are better at moving meditation than just trying to sit still and be quiet.
Thank you. That's great. So remember, Wednesdays at 11, Laura has these every week, the Qigong classes, free virtual ones for our families. And just about OPAC, just a little bit, we also have our weekly drop-ins Tuesdays at 7:30 with our parent liaisons to support any parent who needs support, information, resources, that peer-to-peer support to know that you're not alone in this journey. Like Laura said, reach out to your network, to people that want to help, your friends, your family. And OPAC is also here. Parent liaisons are all parents who have had children with cancer. They understand that journey firsthand. So Tuesdays at 7:30. You can join us. And on Friday, this Friday at 8, we'll have another virtual presentation like this with Oksana Kavaliova. She's a music therapist and a psychotherapist. She's joining our Tuesday evening drop-ins until the end of June to provide support to families. And she will do a session for us on Friday. Family-friendly, kids can join in. There'll be music, just a wonderful session for the whole family to attend this Friday at 8. So if there's nothing else, I guess we'll end it here. Thank you again so much, Laura, for sharing. And oh, somebody sent me a personal message. I'll respond to that, Jen. But anyway, thank you so much for everybody for attending tonight and for Laura sharing your story with everybody. Thank you.
You.
Thanks. Bye.